Hi there! I thought I'd like to try and make a report on all of the bass trades I've done this year, since it's been quite a busy one. At first the idea was to try and make a video of the journey of one single bass, but since I already sold that one and went headfirst into the next catastrophe, it might just make more sense to list all of these. This style of content is entirely new to me, and I'm a bit nervous on how it will turn out, so be sure to let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more content like this. Now strap in, because 2022 has been hot! So I started off the year with a collection of 4 guitars and 3 basses, just enough to fill up the 7-space rack over there. Early on I realized that it didn't really make sense for me to own that many guitars, since I'm not using them on my videos and I just like owning those. So I gave in and sold 2 of those, the Squier Classic Vibe Esquire and the Jackson HT7P Juggernaut. That left me with 2 guitars and 3 basses. The Fender American Professional 2 Jazz Bass, the 1988 Area Pro 2 XRB2, and the infamous Charvel Dimas Bass JJ5. Right after I had sold the Jackson Juggernaut 7-string, I saw an advert online for a Warmoth precision bass. The pictures were outright terrible, and I could maybe just see that the neck might have been roasted maple. Other than that, they only said that the bass had Schaller hardware and EMG pickups. I was skeptical on all the specs, but I took the gamble and bought the bass. After a bit of hassle in the shipping, I finally got a box in the mail, and inside was this gorgeous precision bass with a roasted maple neck, stainless steel frets, and a reverse headstock. This bass has been an absolute joy, and I'm not looking to sell it anytime soon. Rather, I'm looking to add more Warmoth basses into my collection. I'm 100% sold on the quality, and especially the satin lacquer that they use on the body that just doesn't get glossy. I've had this bass for 9 months now, and I think I'm the 3rd owner. Warmoth, share your secrets. The world needs to know. Right after I had bought the Warmoth, I saw that the local Dingwall dealer in Finland had an ex-demo D-Roc standard for sale. The price was great, and I had already been thinking of selling the American Professional Jazz Bass, so off it went and I placed an order for the D-Roc a few days later. I have already done a full review for this bass, so I'm not going to spend more time talking about it. You can check out the full review here. I had some issues with the order because they had somehow misplaced the original gig bag that came with the bass, so I didn't get the extra support for the body, nor did I get the Dunlop strap locks. I did get those strap locks after dealing with the customer support for a few weeks, but I never got the support for the gig bag. They wanted me to buy an entire new gig bag instead. And now I'm still always a bit worried when I'm traveling with my D-Roc, since the gig bag just doesn't have the right support for the lower part of the body. It has been okay so far, but so far so good. Let's hop on forward. Somewhere around here I also realized that since I'm not playing guitar in any bands right now, it doesn't really make sense for me to have a 50-watt all-tube guitar head in my room. I happened to spot an advert from someone looking to trade or sell their Mesa Boogie Carbine M9, and I offered them my EVH 5153 50-watt tube head, and they accepted. So now I had a 900-watt rack-mounted bass head also in my room. Quickly afterwards I realized that that also didn't make too much sense. So I sold off my Mesa Boogie M9. After all, I was already satisfied with my Fender Rumble 200 bass head for live and rehearsals, and 900 watts seemed like a total overkill for any situations I might run into. With the money I got from that sale and a bit of my savings, I bought another Dingwall. This was back in July. I stumbled upon a second-hand but great condition NG3 in a rather rare Ducati Mate Swirl finish. And this was my first 5-string Dingwall, and I was so disappointed. The tone was miles away from what I got with my D-Roc standard, even in passive mode. I later ran into a post at Talkbase where they mentioned that the NG and combustion models had their pickups almost a centimeter closer to the bridge than on the D-Roc series. This matched with the tone I was experiencing, with the D-Roc being just like a jazz bass but turbocharged, and the NG3 being much brighter and having almost this brittle and papery top end. I did want to give it a proper try, so I stuck with it for a few months there. Okay, and we are back. I just had to go and pick up a new bass to be featured in this series, and we'll get to that in the end of the video. August and the best parts of September were a bit quiet on this front, since I was just so blown away by the awesome response I got to my Muse covers and just getting a DM from Darkglass one day. But in late September I finally gave in and I sold my green Charvel bass. That bass had accumulated a lot of negative feelings towards it, and it wasn't good enough to actually bother dealing with those. Ultimately, the fact that it wasn't a 35-inch scale length bass and that the bridge had a bit of trouble accepting even a .130 string was what settled it for me, even though it was a really nice bass otherwise. If it was a 4-string from the same series, I think I might have kept it, but for now I think I'll just stay away from basses that are not 35 inches or more, especially in the 5-string region. I traded the Charvel to a Jackson made in Japan concert bass and immediately sold it to a friend. That bass had the volume knob right next to the G string, and that's just a hard pass for me. With the money I got from these sales, I then went on to hunt a really nice Warwick Corvette bass, since I've been after that sound for quite a while. I found a few Fame models in Germany with basically just the exact specs of a Corvette, and I contacted them both. I managed to buy a Fame Baphomet 4, which I thought would be in a nice condition. This instrument had a Bubinga body, an oblong neck and a Wenge fretboard, all specs that I have been wanting to try out for a while now. It took the seller a few days to ship the bass, but then I received this cryptic message. Forgot to mention, the bass is on his way. Took a while, the first package was 2 centimeters too big, and we are in Germany has to be exactly right. I packed a little surprise for waiting into the package. Hope you enjoy it. Have fun with a wonderful beast of a bass. Well, the package arrived after 5 days of shipping, but it had a quite odd shape for an electric bass. Once I got the package open, I realized that they had to take the neck off to fit it within the shipping sizes. No problems here, let's just give it a quick clean before setting it up and seeing how it sounds. The surprise the seller was talking about was 5 bottles of German beer, neatly packed inside the package. I set those aside for later and started cleaning up the body. For some reason the seller had felt the need to use brown packing tape to keep the neck screws inside the neck holes. The bass itself was also in quite a rough shape, but that's what you get when buying second hand. I started cleaning up the mess the tape had left, and then I heard a crack.
What you say? That you only meant well. Well, of course you did. What you say? That it's all for the best. Well, of course it is.
Now, if you're not familiar how gluing wood works, it's basically impossible to rip apart a proper glue seam. If you can't rip apart a solid block of wood, you can't rip apart 2 pieces of wood that have been glued together. As soon as I saw that there is a crack, I sent a message to a friend who is also a luthier and set up an appointment for the next day. I packed the body up and took it to work with me the next day, full of anxiety. I arrived at my friend's workshop, he took off the pickups and the bridge, and this was the result. I had just spent over 600 euros on a base that fell apart in my hands right after it had arrived. At this point I was mortified and I feared for the repair bill. I left the workshop, went home and wrote a strongly worded message to the seller. At this point the beers proved quite useful. I did, however, find out that most of those were readily available in my local stores as well. In late October, I got a message from my friend. They had been successful in gluing the body together with relative ease. I paid the bill and took the body back home with me. And at this point, I had already owned the base for over a month. And I had never heard a single note being played with it, and I had no idea how it would feel to play. I cleaned the body and the neck, and I managed to paint an entire cleaning cloth black with gunk and dirt, but I got most of it off. I couldn't assemble the electronics though, because now the neck pickup cavity was just a hair too small for the pickup itself. Also, 2 of the pickup screws used previously had broken inside the body and those had to be drilled out. I had a friend help me with the assembly and then I finally got to play the bass. I have to admit that the moment was really nerve-wracking. I don't think I have been that nervous in my entire life. But the bass sounded great. And the EQ was really good. The bass and the high EQ were both at the right place. I then took the bass home and did a quick setup to it and noticed that the neck had a twist in it. So this one had to go too. I made an honest advert online and listed all the faults and the whole story of the bass, and finally managed to only lose a few hundred euros to this whole ordeal, and a whole lot of brain cells. While this whole fame thing was happening, I also realized that I just didn't like the NG3. I tried adjusting the pickup height and using the built-in EQ, but ultimately the different pickup positioning was just too much for me. I think the reasoning behind the pickup positions is to make the D-Roc sound a bit more fat and full and warm, just like its Gibson counterpart. Whatever the reason, I didn't like it and off it went. And then it was already time for my next obsession. I was browsing the local second-hand marketplace and I spotted this suspiciously cheap Washburn USA custom shop 6-string. It only cost a few hundred euros and the price also included a form-fitting hard case for the bass. This sounded way too good to be true, but the seller was local, so out into the -10-degree snowstorm I went. While on my way, I got a message from the seller stating that they had tried to adjust the truss rods, but couldn't find any, and that the price was now lower. That's quite alarming, but I was already on my way, so I had to check this out. The bass was beautiful and in pretty much mint condition. The only fault here was the setup, and that was pretty wild. This is what we professionals call a pretty wacky setup. I did manage to peek into the truss rod cavity and saw something there, but I didn't have an Allen key with me. We agreed on the price because it was a bit unclear whether we could adjust the truss rod and straighten out the neck. While on my way home, I realized that the original owner had put an airline sticker to the side of the case and it had their full contact information. And that's when I realized that this bass had some history behind it. Someone had played this bass all over Europe on festivals, with the crowd going wild to the beats of Bone Thump MC's Freestyler. I wasn't able to adjust the truss rod at home though, so off to my luthier friend it went. And this bass didn't have just one, but two broken truss rods inside it. The repair would be costly and with no guarantee of the results. At best, we could take off the entire fretboard, and at worst we would have to sand down the entire fretboard. I threw this challenge to the friend that helped me assemble the famed Baphomet, and they agreed. But the results won't be in until late this spring, so we'll just have to wait and see. While this was happening, I finally spotted the bass I have been after the whole autumn. A 2008 made in Germany Corvette standard with an ash body, an oval neck, and a Wenge fingerboard and MEC electronics. This one had a good price and was in good condition, but the seller didn't know anything about basses or setups, which I find to be pretty typical at this point. Few people are actually aware of how their instrument works and how to set up it. But I managed to set up a face-to-face meeting so we could check out the bass together. As I anticipated, the bass had quite a bow in the neck, but otherwise looked quite straight to me. After spending a good while cleaning the instrument and setting it up, I noticed that both tuners on the right-hand side of the neck were broken. Apparently, these tuners used to be made in the People's Republic of China and they don't really last. Well, good to know. New treble side tuners were out of stock everywhere in Finland, so I'll just have to wait a bit to replace these. I'll also need to get a neck shim for the neck pocket because currently I just can't get the action where I want it to be. I really like the sound of this bass though, so I think I'll just stick with it for now. The Warwick rock and roll clank is something that I have always been jealous of, and now I've got just the bass for that. I'll just need to stick to the money frets and all's good in the world. There's one more bass that I was supposed to get this year, but it seems like the shipment has been delayed a bit. I was hoping I could get the bass to me before the New Year's, but I hear that it hasn't even arrived to the supplier yet, so we'll just have to wait. If you're clever, you might be able to guess the brand and the model correctly. In fact, let's make this a game. I'll shout out everyone who guesses the model correctly in the review for the bass. So get your guesses going on in the comments down below. And that's my bass haul for 2022. I started up the year with 4 guitars and 3 basses and ended it with 2 guitars and 4 basses. Interestingly, the only bass I have owned for over 2 years at this point is my Blue Area Pro 2 XRB2. And that has just got to be the worst bass I have owned in the last 5 years. But it has a certain mojo and I quite dig it. I hope you liked the video, and if you're still watching, I think you're either a bass geek like I am, or you have been in a coma for 10 years and having me ramble on about my bass odyssey is the final thing your family is trying before shutting off your life support. Better get that ass up then. Thank you so much for watching. If you're like me and like hearing about basses and bass gear in general, I think you'll be satisfied with my future videos as well, so you might as well subscribe. That's here. You can also follow me on Instagram. That's here, where I'll post occasional behind the scenes content, memes and all that stuff. I have some really exciting stuff coming out for next year and I can't wait to tell you about it. Take care and I'll see you later.